All right.
Eula was telling me that she saw how the long-haul truckers in Russia keep warm in their not in their trucks, but sometimes when they stop and they get out, they take concrete blocks that you build houses with,
Yeah.
concrete building blocks, and they soak them in diesel fuel. They put them in a pan or bucket or something full of diesel fuel, and that block absorbs that diesel. And then when they want their fire, they just light that block, and that diesel in the block burns, and that's how they get their fire. She was saying, so Reuben can try that. But I said, man, he couldn't stay in the house.
That reminds me of, Okay, so anyway, looking back at the first part, we discussed how you are not your body. There are two kinds of energies. You have material energy, which is dead inherently, and you have life, which is inherently alive, and that's two kinds of energies. And we have two bodies. We have a gross body and a subtle body, so a mental body and our physical body. And there was one thing that I wanted to perhaps start with that I remembered. This is a nice comparison, because when we speak about these things, it could be, since we can't directly perceive the presence of life, we have to use a little bit of other methods. And there was someone who compared it to, like, I'm sitting here inside and the house is very well insulated. It's not, but let's suppose it was. I couldn't hear the outside wind. I couldn't directly perceive it in that way, but I can see a tree outside, and I can see that the tree is waving here and waving here and there. I can see that it's moving, the tree. So by that symptom of the wind, I can perceive the existence of wind, since I see the symptoms. So I'm like, and then, it makes sense. Like when someone explains the presence of wind and how that works, just like the presence of life, then, it all makes sense. Now I understand why the tree is waving and why it's moving, even though I'm not out there in the wind, but I can perceive it from the symptoms, just like we can see the symptoms of life in the body. Mm-hmm. So that's...
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of wind, this is kind of off the subject, but it's just a nice thing to remember, is love is like wind. You can't see it, but you can feel it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see this, if you take it to where you just went, the symptoms of love, like you see the symptoms of the wind by the tree moving. So, you can see the symptoms of love with the care and the compassion and, the warmth and so on. But anyway, that's a different avenue.
Yeah. Well, it links back to something actually that I got this question from a friend of mine up here, and I introduced her to the fact that I told her, well, you have since you're a spirit soul, there's actually a deeper spiritual love that you need, and that connection, that having that and feeling that is something much deeper than the ordinary love that we have. That is not the unconditional spiritual love that we're referring to. And she asked, like, so how do I know that? Like, how do I know when I'm in that? When I'm feeling that, or when I'm having that? So it's...
My answer to those kind of questions is, you'll know.
Yeah.
You won't have to speculate. I wonder if I'm there yet. It's like when you're hungry and you eat. Well, how do you know, you're hungry? Well, you know. And how do you know you're full? You know. There's a feeling, there's an experience that goes with it.
Yeah.
So people just can't get out of their mind enough to actually just go there and find out for yourself. Mm-hmm.
And that's and that journey, again, to link it even back more to what we're referring to, that journey is really starting with the understanding that I'm not my body. And I'm gonna I wanted us to read a little bit from Bhagavad-gita, which is the main yoga text, which is very, very clear and very describing in this regard. And I know you have a lot of quotes in your head, so maybe you could even read from, But I remember you. Let's see what I was gonna. Yeah, because you said. You also said in the last discussion, you said a lot of these things you can't perfectly realize until you do, but you can accept it. It's perfectly true. Like, yeah, the perfect realization that we spoke about the last part, that you're not your body. You may not have fully realized it, but you can accept it fully. And then you gradually realize it, like make it reality in your life.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Here's the sad part of these things. Many people, and now millions and millions and millions of recorded out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, in hospitals, during operations, where it's provable.
Yeah.
They're hooked up to all the machines, and so when they go flatline, there's no heartbeat, there's no blood pressure, there's nothing like that.
No brain activity either, yeah.
No brain activity, all that. Then, that's officially dead. Right? I mean, that's what death is, when all these life symptoms stop.
Yeah.
See? And so then there's a mad rush by the doctors and nurses to try to revive the person with the shock therapy or whatever their method may be. But the person has left their body, that's true, so there's no life in that body then. But they're still in the room and they're still observing what's going on. They can be up in a corner of the room or up by the ceiling or standing off to the side, whatever. And they're watching this whole procedure going on, quote, them, their body, and then they realize, well, there I am, but here I am. I'm not that body.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, they can't deny it. And then they come back into the body.
Wow.
And now there's life back in the body and so on. And so the doctors can't really explain it because they can't go beyond, the physical senses almost. And they refuse to explain it or whatever they do. But the person has had that experience. I'm not the body.
Yeah.
But they don't really change much in their life. It doesn't really change their life. They don't go on a big quest to find out, well, what was that? How did that happen? Yeah. Who am I really? If I'm not this, a few do. For a few people, it really changes their life. For others, it's just an experience. It's a good story. They'll tell their friends about it, and etc. And then it's just life as usual. Okay, now I'm back in the body. I'm back. I'm now me again.
Yeah.
And so that's a sad part because they've had that opportunity. It's not about faith. It's not about philosophy. It's about, I saw with my own senses, not the physical eyes because they were on the operating table. But obviously I've got another set of senses. I've got another way to see and hear. I heard the nurses saying, or the doctor saying what they said, but they don't really take it anywhere, and it's just like, okay, let's just forget about that or just remember it with, the memory that, oh, wow, that was special. And just go on. And like I say, that's a sad thing because they had an opportunity given to them by the Supreme Lord, directly or indirectly, for a big, major realization, and they just walked away from it.
So, what maybe that's, I wanted to maybe, but I don't know if that's too detailed, like, or maybe we can make it more practical in a sense for people to understand it. So let's say you're lying on the operating table, like you flatline. So the spirit soul, the life particle, leaves the body, but it brings with it the subtle body?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the time of death, the only thing that leaves the body, the only thing that, well, let me start it again. At the time of death, when the soul leaves the body, it's still covered by the subtle mental body. Mm. And the only thing that's left behind is the physical body. That's the one that they bury or cremate or whatever. But the soul is still covered by the subtle body, the mental body. Mm. And according to the desires, that body has a certain shape. The mental body has a certain shape. And so the next physical body will be designed to fit the shape of the mental body. Just like our hand has a certain shape, and a glove is designed to fit the shape of the hand.
Yeah.
So the physical body fits the shape of the mental body. So the consciousness that we're developing now, our desires and our attachments and so on, is creating the next birth, really. And we leave the body. That's what we take with us. Our desires take us into our next life.
Wow.
So I often use the example of hang gliders or parasailers.
Yeah.
They like to fly. Wingsuit guys, whatever. They like to fly. So really, they understand birds do it a lot better than I do, and it's much safer for birds. You don't see birds crashing. They're not afraid. They're not worried. They're not preparing their suit before they take off and hope that nothing goes wrong. They just jump off a limb and fly and set on another limb and cruise around in the air currents and whatever, and that's their life. So, if a person's really addicted to or attached to, wanting that experience of flying, then they start looking at birds and going, wow, that's cool. Those guys, they have a good life, And some of them even talk about what bird they'd like to be in their next life, Of course, everybody wants to be an eagle. Nobody's going to say, yeah, I'd like to be a crow.
Or a pigeon.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, they leave their body. And next lifetime, no problem. They peck their way out of a shell. They're covered with feathers, and they fly their whole life. There's a saying, as man proposes, God disposes. We get what we want. If that's what you want, that's what you get. You've got a bird body mentally, and here's your external suit to complement it, to go with it. So now you can fulfill your dream, your desire. And so it's important to cultivate a certain, not a certain consciousness, but a spiritual consciousness, because the same thing applies.
Exactly.
If you've developed a spiritual consciousness, then you've developed truly the desire for a spiritual body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so your next body will be not material, see, but it will be spiritual. It will fulfill your desire. It is a form that is you. It is not a form over top of the spirit. The spirit takes on a form, and that's called the swarupa, the spiritual form.
And
that's an eternal form, whereas all the material bodies are temporary, because material energy is temporary. And that's another reason why there's so much struggle, in the material world. We're an eternal spirit soul in a temporary material body, and there's a direct conflict right there. Right from the beginning, there's a conflict. Yeah. So we're always struggling to survive, struggling to not die. But the body's getting old. We don't want to get old, but it does. We can't stop it. The scientists have been working madly for a long time, trying to discover the secret of aging, so nobody has to get old.
Yeah,
but they haven't done it because it's built in. That's how it's designed, And then you're faced with death, and that feels wrong because the soul's eternal. The soul doesn't die. But when you identify with the body, you're thinking, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And you're really not, but your perception is, I am, because I'm the body, and the body's, faced with death at any moment.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing conflict, and it's a struggle, and it's a cause for great, concern and fear and all kinds of adverse effects on our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doctor, don't let me die. Don't let me die. Doctor, don't let me die.
But like you said in previous podcasts, you said, like, in that sense, death is not possible. Like, I'm not going to die. Like, I cannot die. The spirit soul cannot die. It will leave this particular body, but you cannot die.
That's true, but the person who identifies with the body doesn't know that.
Exactly. And so the suffering is coming from the false identification with the body. That's kind of like you're so strongly holding on to that illusion, or you're really, really thinking that, and then that's suffering in that, because you, while knowing the truth will free you, But
it's described in our scriptures that everybody's afraid of death. Even the macho guy who says, I'm not afraid of anything, at the moment of death is afraid.
Yeah.
In that connection, I tell you a story. There's a friend of mine. I haven't seen him in many years, but he was coming around and chanting, etc. But he was physically very, very big, strong guy from Russia. He's Russian, lived in Russia, but actually Norwegian.
Oh.
I think his mother was Norwegian and his father was Russian, or vice versa.
All right.
And but he grew up in Russia. But he was fair complexion, blonde hair, like a Norwegian Viking kind of guy. But I mean, extremely strong. And his profession was bodyguard. I mean, he was a real one. I mean, he was a bodyguard for the rich and famous, and he was the bodyguard for Doctors Without Borders when they were in Afghanistan, and all kinds of situations, But anyway, there's many parts to the story. So one time he was in, I think he was in Siberia, and somehow he was on some expedition with some group doing something, and he got lost, and it was, a real life and death situation, and he was, feeling, oh, wow, I'm going to die. And he was afraid. And so he was praying to God, please don't let me die. Please don't let me die, So even this strong guy who wasn't afraid of, fighting and guns and whatever it was afraid of death, So, this was a story that confirmed what the scriptures say, that at the time of death, everybody's afraid.
Yeah.
And, but if you're not the body, and you've really, not just philosophically, but you really have that true understanding and realization, and even more so, you're feeling really protected and connected with the Supreme Lord, then it's just another day in a life, so to speak.
And I wanted to read something from Bhagavad-gita, but I also wanted to read something from Srimad Bhagavatam about our actual function. So I don't know which one I... let's start with just this one quote from Bhagavad-gita, or text. This chapter 2, text 12. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the Lord himself speaking that truth.
Yeah, and he continues, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And if you've got some faith in Scripture that this is true, then that explains it all. What is it? Number one, in 2:12, we're eternal. See, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings.
Yeah.
See, that means we're all eternal, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. No beginning and no end. Eternality of the soul. Yeah. And it also points out that we're all individual, eternal spirit souls. It's not like we're all one. You and all these kings individually have existed and will exist eternally. So the individuality and the eternality of the soul is defined in that text. And yeah. And then in the what is it, 2:13, right?
Yeah.
That, the body's always changing. Boyhood, youth, old age. And then the soul goes into another body at the time of death. That's the Lord himself explaining reincarnation, how it works. That there is such a thing as reincarnation. So you can deny it, but to deny it, you have to deny the truth of this teaching, the Scripture, the words of the Lord himself.
Yeah.
So it's not a really difficult subject at all, It's right there if you want to hear it. But if you don't want to hear it, then you say, oh, this Scripture's not true. It's just whatever. You can always find some excuse, So really, all these truth teachings are for people who want to know the truth. And if you don't want to know the truth, then nothing can help.
If you don't want to know the truth, then you won't have the truth, and you'll stay in that illusion and the unfortunate suffering that will be a natural consequence of us not living in the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why Bhagavad-gita is so wonderful, because it is so clearly explaining life.
Yeah, and these are only 2 quotes, but there are many. But then, so one can look at that more. We also have a podcast episode, Matter versus Life, that anyone who's more, want to go into depth in the difference between matter and life can check that one out. But I guess maybe we could just end with a small conclusion, in the sense of that then, if I'm not my body, that's my essence, but my function then, as it's stated in the Vedic text and the Vedic wisdom, is of service to others and service to the Supreme, not to try to control everything and be the Lord, but to be of service, actually.
Yeah, maybe we should do a podcast on that subject.
And we do a separate one, because that's a big
function. Because it's too quick to just summarize it in a few words. I mean, because even if you know your spirit soul, then what?
Well, what do you?
Okay, so now what?
Well, just like those people who had a near death experience. Like, now what? And
it's easy to just go back to what you were doing before. Had a miraculous recovery. Now I'm out of the hospital. Even if they say the Lord saved me, whatever, now I can just get back to my family and my job and my routine and my life.
Yeah.
I got my life back.
Yeah.
But
so let's do that. But then, just pointing out the importance then of holding on to this truth and like cultivating this wisdom and inherent knowledge through meditation is so essential. That's just something that I've heard you point out many times as well, like the importance of doing that, and because when we meditate, these truths become more and more clear to us, and we're able to hold on to them and stay in that and not be influenced by all the other things that are out there that are saying something else.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing, it starts making sense, the pieces of the puzzle start coming together, and you can start seeing the big picture. And without the meditation, the chanting of the mantras and so on, it very easily can just become another philosophy of life.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just another philosophy. The world's full of philosophical scholars, but that's not the goal. The goal is realizing it and knowing it to be true and living it. Yeah. So let's chant and make that a little closer to reality.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. Gauranga Haribo. Never get tired of that one. Haribo, Gauranga, Gauranga, Haribo. 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 Haribo, Haribo, Gauranga, Haribo. Gauranga, Haribo. Haribo, Haribo, Gauranga, Haribo. Gauranga, Haribo. Gauranga, Haribo. Gauranga, Haribo.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's here done. The closing moments
of this second part. So, yeah, thank you.
You might wonder who that is singing in the background. That's the Chintamani singers.
your crew over there. Maybe sometime we can have a talk with Slava, or, we said we could do that sometime.
Yeah, we have him on as a guest.
Yeah.
He can be the guest speaker. We can have the whole team on.
yeah, why not? Would be.
Everybody's got their story. Everybody's got their, interesting moments to tell about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is not for just, a special group of people. This is for anybody and everybody. I guess it is for a special group of people, those who want to do it. That's a special group.
Yeah.
But it's nothing to do with the nationalities or races or ages or sexes or educational backgrounds or any of that.
Yeah. Which is, And you have to see beyond that. The fact that you and me are in male bodies and, doesn't mean that it's only for people in male bodies or anything like that. We are both outdoor interested. That doesn't mean that you cannot, be in a city boy or city girl and still be doing this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So.
But, most people are in that other category, the urban, city lifestyle situation.
No problem. Yeah.
Okay, Ruben, thank you again, and keep the fires burning.
Yeah, will do. Will do.
Don't let it go out.
Yeah, one went out, but I have two, so that's good. I have one extra. All right. Thank you, Malikia. We'll see you.
Namaste, everybody. Namaste, Ruben.
See you next week.
In Slava, all the best. Haribol.
Haribol.